From the heart of Orlando, Florida, you are listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice Radio. And I am your host, David Gornoski, and thank you again. Welcome. Welcome back to my program. So glad you could join me in my neighborhood in beautiful Central Florida here in Orlando. The problems we have, they are so simple. We do not need a rocket scientist to figure them out. But just in case, in studio once again is my good friend, Dr. Weiping Yu, physicist over at Kennedy Space Center.
Thank you, David, for having me again.
Thank you for joining me. And this is going to be an amazing program, as all of our programs are. So you're not going to want to miss a minute of it for the next hour. I want people to remember the premise of this entire show. The premise of this entire show and all of my writings at all the conservative and independent news sites that I write for is about having personhood as the key guiding principle, not group think. If we're stuck on group think, we get caught in dogma, and we get caught always depending on, well, I'll just trust the experts, whatever the consensus is. And that's great because they're right on a lot of things. But sometimes when we have big government prop up group think consensus, it calcifies into dogma. And that dogma has a way of shielding people from more accurate information that develops if we had a real free market where capital is able to flow to solutions. And that includes medicine. So joining me on the program today is a world-renowned biologist. His name is Dr. Thomas Seyfried, and I have had the pleasure of speaking with him a few times, and I've enjoyed every time I do, because he is one of those people who challenges groupthink dogma, and he looks for real solutions. And in this case, he looks at cancer, which is a big, scary word for a lot of people. There's a lot of people that are just there. I think I have a personal theory that there's a lot of people that have a subconscious fear of all these major illnesses, and it drives them to have despair. It drives them to fear. It drives them to anxiety, which leads to scapegoating their neighbor or blaming other parties and, always getting caught up in hate and division. But if we can look for real solutions ourselves by challenging groupthink, perhaps we don't have to live in that fear. Perhaps we can live in a sense of gratitude and courage, knowing that these things, these big monsters like illnesses, are not the monsters we think they are. They're actually gnats. And with a little bit of ingenuity, we can actually see these illnesses in the driver's seat. We're going to see them leaving us behind in history. So, Dr. Seyfried, thank you for joining me.
Well, great, David. It's nice to be here. Thank you.
I'm really excited about your work. Now, you are at Boston College, and
that's right.
you have spent years. How long have you been in the business of this research here in the cancer field?
Well, we started our work in cancer while I was at Yale University, maybe 35 years ago. And then I took the program to Boston College. But we've been working on epilepsy and lipid storage diseases like Tay-Sachs disease, as well as cancer and a variety of other of neurodegenerative diseases. So, but the cancer problem has always been a main thrust for us for about over 30 years.
Very good. Now, you wrote a book called Cancer as a Metabolic Disease, and it's on the origin, the management, and the prevention of cancer. And you basically are challenging the reigning paradigm which dominates cancer research, and that is that cancer is a genetic disease. Can you explain briefly the difference between what you have discovered, that it's a metabolic disease, versus what the conventional paradigm is stuck in, which is a genetic disease?
Yes. Well, the idea that cancer is a metabolic disease originates with the work of the distinguished scientist Otto Warburg from Germany, where over about 100 years ago, he clearly defined what the nature of cancer was. It was a defect in respiration. Cells couldn't breathe or obtain oxygen, use oxygen for energy, and they would fall back on this ancient fermentation pathway. Fermentation is the development of energy without oxygen. And basically, he was a Nobel Prize winner for discovering issues for respiration. And he had it clearly defined all these years ago. And basically what I did was, we did basic research, and I did, to be honest with you, I heard the word Warburg, like everyone in science does, but I didn't really know what he actually did in the cancer field until we started evaluating what happens when you do calorie restriction and ketogenic diets on these cancer cells, and they were dying. And I said, wow, this is really amazing. And, what's the origin of this? And you find out that Otto Warburg had clearly defined the nature of the problem many years ago. And then it became clear to me, I said, why don't we recognize this guy for having defined the origin of the disease? And then it became very clear that the field had forgotten about Warburg or considered him to be wrong, and then went on chasing all these genes. Now, not to say that gene mutations aren't present in cancer cells, they are. But we have found, and others have found, that these are all downstream epiphenomena. They're not the cause, they're the effect of the damage to the respiration. So once you realize that the origin is a metabolic disease, and you can explain very clearly that the gene mutations are an effect and not the cause, then the whole field becomes questionable. And the problem is, of course, as you've mentioned in your introduction, people have this dogmatic view that cancer is a genetic disease, and they've spent billions and billions of dollars on this. And now we realize that it's fundamentally wrong. And it's very hard to turn the ship with a massive momentum. So it's going to take some time for people to realize that most of what we're doing in the cancer field is absurd.
That's right. Thomas Kuhn, he was a scientific philosopher, and he had he was known for the one who introduced the word paradigm shift. And he said that, a lot of scientists, when they're operating in a paradigm, in a given dogma, they operate by faith that the dogma that they have received is true. Now, that's not a knock against them. That's just the way science actually works on a day-to-day basis. And so what you're doing is you're challenging that dogma because you're looking at the data and you're finding that it's not just random genetic mutation. That is a downstream effect that is present with cancer, but you're finding that it has to do with metabolism, which for our listeners, metabolism is our energy, right? It's how we get our food.
Yes, energy is everything. Without energy, a cell can't live. Nothing can live without fundamental energy, and that's ATP. So the difference between a normal cell and a tumor cell is how they make ATP. And normal cells, all of us are breathing. You're talking to me, I'm speaking to you, mainly because I'm breathing and you're breathing. But if we were to hold our breath we would both go unconscious. Now, cancer cells don't use this kind of energy. They use a fermentation energy. This is the kind of energy that existed on our planet before oxygen came into the atmosphere. There were a large number of organisms on our planet that existed using fermentation energy, and there was no oxygen in the atmosphere. When oxygen came in, we had the development of multicellular organisms, and eventually, we all evolved into these different organisms. But the cancer cell is simply falling back on this ancient pathway to generate energy without oxygen. And the issue is, what are they using to generate fermentation energy? And it's two simple molecules. It's glucose, the sugar, and the amino acid glutamine. And when you take those two fuels away from the tumor cells, they die very easily. There's no tumor cell that can survive without glucose and glutamine. And when we challenge glucose and glutamine in every single system of cancer, the cells die.
Wow.
Now, the issue, of course, is that we could easily implement this, and we're doing that on patients, and the cancer cells die. So the question is, why don't we use this more openly? But of course, you're going to have to change what everybody thinks the nature of the disease is.
Can you explain briefly what a ketogenic diet is? It's something that I've actually incorporated into my lifestyle, and I'm finding a lot of health benefits with it. But briefly for the listeners, what is a ketogenic diet?
Yeah, the ketogenic, and the downside of the term, it's just the word diet. In sophisticated medicine, diet is like always ambiguous and not clear. Diet can be almost anything. The ketogenic diet just happens to be labeled with the word diet. It's actually ketogenic metabolic therapy, and it's a type of medicine. It shouldn't be viewed as a diet, and that's just unfortunate. And terms and labels and things can certainly jade the way somebody would view something. But basically, what it is a consumption of fat, and you can achieve what we call therapeutic ketosis. You can do it with ketogenic diet, or you can do it by simply, water-only fasting. Blood sugar goes down. If you stop eating, blood sugar goes down. There's no way you're going to achieve high levels of blood sugar if you don't eat food. So what you do is water-only fast, blood sugar goes down, but we don't go unconscious. Our brain needs glucose. But we can also burn fats, and we make these ketone bodies. This is like putting long-chain fatty acids into a wood chipper, and out come these small water-soluble products from fats. And they will replace glucose for our brain. This is an evolutionarily conserved adaptation to the absence of food. So when you go on these ketogenic diets or water-only therapeutic fasting and this kind of thing, blood sugar goes down gradually. Oh, well, we have to have an alternative fuel. Otherwise, we're all going to go unconscious. And the brain and the liver starts metabolizing fats. We start taking fats out of all parts of our body. They go to the liver. The liver puts them in this metabolic wood chipper, and out come these little water-soluble ketone bodies, and they replace glucose so that our brains and the rest of our physiology can function. So what happens then is you're transitioning the body away from a sugar molecule to a water-soluble fat molecule, the ketone body, and this is what we call therapeutic ketosis, and you lose weight when you do this, obviously, because you're not taking in glucose. You get fat from eating sugar. You don't get fat from eating fat. This is the misconception. If you eat fat, you lose weight. If you eat sugar, you gain weight.
Wow.
So these are the things that have to be recognized.
See, now that's what I call challenging groupthink. I like this. We're talking to Dr. Thomas Seyfried. He is a world-renowned researcher in the field of cancer. He's using the ketogenic diet to get significant results. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice Radio. I'm your host, David Gornoski. We'll see you in just a few seconds.